I was corrected, Sherry, corrected by one of our more than one of our listeners. Well, it was two. I don't want to make it sound like
it was a pretty broad generalization when I read that statement. But
when I was corrected, I was told that millennials and Gen Zs, they do in fact read. It is us Gen Xers who listen to everything. It's us that have earbuds constantly protruding from our faces. You know, we can't even take our rightful place as the leaders of this country. We're letting the boomers wither into death with the reins in their hands. How could we expect it to be readers? We're clearly just listeners. If we can't get that right, you know? But no, more than one, which sounds like it could be any number, like it could be 1,000 of our listeners emailed me to say they were insulted by me saying that people don't read anymore. Mm-hmm. It wasn't 1,000, it was 2. But we have started our written word on our Sober and Unashamed blog. We have started recording that as an extra bonus episode of the podcast. So instead of 1 episode a week, people get 2 now. And it's basically for us Gen Xers to be able to listen while we're multitasking. You know, I'm going to give us Gen Xers some credit. We work our asses off. Like we go from dawn till
Are you trying to incite a little bit of conversation on your social media post about plotting one generation against another?
Maybe that's what I'm doing. I don't mean to, but hey, I'm a proud Gen Xer and I always have earbuds protruding from my head. So I listen to pretty much, that's where I get everything nowadays. I don't read anymore.
You don't read.
I'm a writer who doesn't read anymore. But so we've started recording our blog posts. They are content rich, concise. You don't have to listen to an hour of rambling to get the point. So I bet you'd like to be on those episodes because you don't have to sit through an hour of rambling.
Yeah, maybe I'll just read some.
You just be the reader from now on.
You can just be a reader sometime.
But so listeners, we want to make you aware that that second podcast drops on Thursday. It's based on a blog post that drops on Wednesday. So you can read Wednesday, listen Thursday, do it up, go crazy. We'll just, you know, and I think it's important that we are recording these and making them into spoken word for us Gen Xers, because I think that while millennials and Gen Zs, they can read, I don't think they've fucked up their lives enough to be all that interested in what we have to say. You know, you have to have some tread worn off your tire before any of this makes any sense, don't you think? When I was the age of a current millennial, I was currently like tearing shit up. I wasn't recognizing that it was torn up yet.
I know you didn't. I did.
Pretty hard to believe this is a roundtable podcast since, as usual, just me talking. But we're going to bring our guests in now. Well, in a second. We're going to bring them in a second. First, so this episode is called The Breathing Room Roundtable. Love that title. This is all about people who have experienced alcoholism in their relationship, and they have made the incredibly wise decision, being a little judgmental here, but I'm proud of these people. They made the incredibly wise decision to take a break, get themselves some breathing room so that they can see with some clarity and move forward. So we have tackled this issue in a general way many, many times on the podcast. The should I stay or should I go question. And the reason we keep coming back to it is because it might be the most critical question there is when it comes to relationship recovery around alcoholism. The conventional wisdom on the should I stay or should I go, especially when there's kids involved, is you should tough it out, stick it out until the kids are 18. I would like to hereby call that conventional wisdom complete bullshit. There is actually research that, of course, I'm not in a position to cite right now, but it's not hard to find. There is research that proves that at least one stable parent making healthy decisions and showing self-respect, that's way more important for the development of the kids than staying in a toxic relationship and suffering through manipulation and gaslighting. The kids want to see one of the parents making the right decisions. And so with that in mind, this should I stay or should I go question is a lot less obvious, I think, than maybe it was to those old boomers, you know, who just stuck it out until the kids were 18, no matter what.
Well, my mom didn't stick it out until I was 18 or my sister was 18.
You're right.
So I'm calling bullshit.
And your sister didn't stick it out either. She made the healthy, right decision too. I need to just stay away from generations.
Yeah.
It's just not working for me.
Not today.
No, it's not. So we first tackled this issue as a main topic of an episode on episode 69, and we titled it, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And I think we even sang the song a little bit or hummed it.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the song by? Oh, come on. Nobody? Okay.
Anybody? Mike?
Okay.
I can sing it. I don't know.
Should I stay or should I go now? Is it The Clash?
I think it might be The Clash. It might be on it.
That's a good guess.
Good enough. Anyway, that's a great episode. That was a long time ago, January of 21.
Yeah, that's long.
Then we recorded 2 episodes, separation roundtables in October and November of 23. So coming up on 2 years ago, episodes 214 and 217, 2 separate separation roundtables with people who had separated and divorced. And then, we heard from some folks that said, hey, how about covering the other side of the fence? How about the people that have stayed in their relationship? And so we covered that on episodes 242 and 243 back in May of last year, just a little bit over a year ago. And so that's the recap. This episode is different because this isn't about permanent decision making, although the people on this episode, they might chime in about the direction they're going toward permanent decision making. But the real theme that we want to cover is therapeutic temporary separation with an intention for healing and perhaps making room for more concrete decision making. So some examples of things that would force temporary therapeutic separation are, the big one that comes up is when somebody goes to rehab, right? If they're in a 30 or 60-day rehab, there is 30 to 60 days of therapeutic temporary separation. And some decisions can be made there, or some intentions anyway. A vacation, an extended vacation, a work trip, that's extended. Somebody goes on a project for 3 months, something like that. Sick parent caretaker, we see that a lot. Somebody, us Gen Xers, we've got a bunch of parents who are, aging. And so often people have to run off and hang on just a second, checking in. Yeah, that's cool, Jennifer. Just answering. Yeah, just your experience is excellent. Sorry, just
I'm sorry,
checking in on the chat real quick. You're all good. Sick parent caretaker. We've got aging parents. A lot of us, not that everybody's Gen Xer, but there's a lot of us who are in this group, and so you got to go travel halfway across the country to spend some time caring for a parent. That can be an example of a temporary therapeutic separation. Military deployment, couch surfing at a friend's place, a short-term lease. So, maybe I'm not ready to sign a year-long lease on a place, but I found this 3-month lease and let's see what this does for us to spend that time apart. Stuff like that. Also, it wasn't on my list, but it should have been sober living after rehab. It's another great example of temporary therapeutic separation. So in our roundtable, we are blessed with 4 people. 2 of them, after the separation, are back together and are working toward relationship recovery and happiness. One of our roundtable guests is moving more in the direction of divorce. And one has some real temporary examples of separation, some time apart, and the relationship is struggling a bit. And so we're going to get lots of different perspectives on this topic of temporary separation. So let's start out by just going around, and we will ask our guests to give us a few minutes to tell us of their story, kind of highlighting what brought about the temporary separation and a little bit about how that went. Kate, can you lead us off tonight?
Sure. So yes, my name is Kate, and I first want to say that I found Echoes of Recovery and Shout Sobriety and through seeking a way to stay with my husband. I mean, that was, he was struggling. I didn't want to leave, so spent a lot of time listening to podcasts and what have you. He had been struggling with alcoholism, probably actively for 3 or 4 years. It's hard to pinpoint because I think probably I didn't recognize it for what it was early on. And it just kept getting, I was struggling a lot with, the nervous system deregulation and activation, and not functioning well anymore in life because of what was going on. Still loved him, was, committed to seeing hopefully our marriage repaired, but ultimately ended up taking a short break. And I don't know if that's I was trying to, there's a lot there. Obviously, I could go on for a long time. So that's the short synopsis is we tried a couple different things and it wasn't working, and I had to back away for my own peace and well-being.
How'd you do it? What did the short break look like?
So I initially was looking at an apartment and had been looking to try and find a short-term lease, 3 or 6 months, and had a couple of people were really urging me, that even if I went for a year, that would give him plenty of time to heal and give us time to reconcile. I did actually look into an apartment, almost signed a 15-month lease, and had a change of heart and backed away from it because it just didn't feel right. I am blessed with an amazing group of friends and a best friend from, my middle school years who offered me, I didn't have to couch surf. She had a full room all to myself, and she said, come stay with us, until you can figure this out. And that was a huge gift. It was a safe place to go, no expectations. She and I have known each other for so long that it was very comfortable. I didn't feel like I was intruding. So I was very fortunate that I had that as an option. And that did the trick. My husband had, he tried, he did go to detox, and said, that was going to launch him into sobriety. Unfortunately, that failed, and that was the catalyst for me to leave, because I didn't think he was committed, to doing what he said he wanted to do, and I couldn't. I was losing empathy. I was losing kindness. I was losing the ability to support him really through anything anymore, and it just was becoming a little toxic for me, and I was probably becoming toxic for him, honestly. So that next week I ended up going to my friend's house, and I ended up staying with her for 5 weeks. And my agreement, if you will, it was kind of me saying this to my husband, this is what I need to come home. I said, I need to see you sober for 30 days, because in my mind that would, and be able to think clearly and really start on a path of sobriety. And, the first week he kind of played with it, but didn't get serious, and asked me to come back after a week. And I was proud of myself because I stood firm, even though, in my heart, I wanted to be home. That's my place. I wanted to be with him. But I decided that no, we really need to stick with this. And after he ended up getting sober and stayed sober for the 30 days that I required. And so I was able to come back home. But it progressed from him, kind of being ambivalent about it. And why are you doing this? And I'd be better if you were home, to really understanding that I needed that time apart, and that he had work to do. So he really did a 180 and committed, and is coming up on 100 days sober. So super proud of him.
That's great. One of the things about that boundary that you set, I mean, that's what I'd call it, as a boundary. You said, this is the amount of time I need us to be apart, and this is what I need to see, in order to come back. The fact that you held to that boundary is super, super important. I feel like if you had kind of given into pressure, and I remember the period pretty clearly, in that the pressure was coming from two places. I think this is important to mention. The pressure was coming certainly from your husband. I would have been pouring on the pressure like you wouldn't believe. So I'm not being critical. That's natural. The pressure was also coming from you, because you wanted it to work, and you wanted to be back in your home, and you just wanted to believe and trust that things would be different. But you held to the boundary that you had set, and the expectation that you set, that was clear for both of you to understand. And I just think that is going to help your relationship going forward, in not just in recovery topics, but in everything, because you have established a boundary, and held firm to it and proven that you can do it. And so I just want to compliment you on that. I think that's really important. And it's important that we not make ultimatums that are, impossible to live up to. Like when we set boundaries, we got to know we can do it, or it actually does more damage than good when we draw lines in the sand and then we erase the line in the sand. So compliments to you, Kate. That was really great. Well done. Yeah, absolutely. Jennifer, your husband travels and you get windows of peace from his travel. So I think you are a great addition to this discussion because there was nothing formal about this. This wasn't, signing a lease or going away. This is just, you see what it's like when he's home and you see what it's like when he's gone. Can you talk a little bit about what the difference is like for you?
Sure. Just for a little bit of background, I guess we've been married for almost 13 years and his drinking has been a problem for about 10. I've been on the verge of divorce for probably about a year and a half, and most recently have had papers drawn up and ready to be filed, but backed down from that when he actually joined Shout Sobriety and has been working on that. Not 100%, but he's working on it. So I think I started noticing a few years ago, he travels, it's usually just for 3-4 days at a time. So it's not long periods of time, but just noticing that I was different around my kids. And I think that's just, more my nervous system relaxed a little bit. My guard was down. I wasn't constantly being hypervigilant, able to laugh and have fun with them a little bit more, much less serious environment. Sleeping better, just more at peace. Not having to constantly worry about, who was going to show up or which husband was going to be here tonight and what that was going to feel like. Yeah.
And just to clarify, you're not a polygamist. Your husband is a Dr. Jekyll and a Mr. Hyde, and you never know.
Yes.
I mean, I think anyone who's listening to an alcoholism podcast probably knows that. What you meant? But I just wanted to clarify.
There's just one husband
with
multiple personalities.
Yeah.
Some that are better than others. Did you ever feel, so this is so interesting to me, when you started to notice the house is relaxed, I'm relaxed, what emotion comes to mind? Guilt over why do I not want my husband to be here, or anger because why the hell do I like it better when my husband's not here? Like, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, all of those, I think. Definitely guilty, but also I think it was eye-opening to me to sort of, for a little bit more context, he's been traveling the whole time. We have 3 kids, and problems, they were really little. The boys were 4 months old, the twins, when he got his first DUI, and there was a lot of time, effort and work put in by me when he was there, and then he would be gone, and it was just easier somehow, even though it was only me caring for these 3 kids under 3. So I think there is some guilt there, I guess, for being glad for him to leave and knowing that I'm going to have some peace, even though I might be working my ass off to get stuff done. That hasn't changed. They're older now, but it's still a lot of work.
It's just different work when they get older.
Yeah, it's different work. So guilt, and then you said something else. I can't remember what.
Well, just anger.
The emotion was. Yeah.
I mean, what an awakening that's got to be to go, I got 3 kids under 3. One of them's a set of twins, and it's easier when my husband's not here. Holy shit. That would be, an awakening and perhaps anger inducing.
Yeah, definitely anger inducing. But then there's the other side of it too. Well, if it's easier, why don't I leave? And, but then what does that look like? That's a whole different kind of hard. And so just a lot of confusion. I think it kept me stuck. It has kept me stuck in this spot for a long time, because it goes both ways.
Yeah. Well, I remember you didn't travel often when we owned our bakery, but for a little while you were on this board, and so you did have to travel. And then, we had some times where you traveled to go back to the East Coast and see family without myself and the kids. And I remember being sad that we were all so much more relaxed when he wasn't there.
Mhm.
It made me really sad that that's how I could see it in the kids. And, they were varying ages from like preteen to, 2 or 3. And we could just be goofy and silly. And the 2 older ones remember a very specific incident because you had a very early morning flight. We took you to the airport. We drove past Einstein Bagels, not plugging them. We're not getting sponsored by them, but it's one of our faves. They had just opened. We went in and we got a dozen bagels and cream cheese. And we came back home and they were all, because they got up early and they're groggy and they're still in their jammies. And we sat and watched the stupidest reality TV show. I'm too embarrassed to say what it is.
You embarrassed?
Finding Bigfoot.
Well, that didn't take long.
They were
Thanks for helping me work that out of everybody. That didn't take long.
so enthralled, and it was so goofy. And one of the kids said, "Dad would hate this," and I was like, "That was heart wrenching." Dad would hate what we were doing, and it was nothing. We were doing anything bad.
Not bad at all.
Yeah. I feel that.
Well, your situation's very relatable, Jennifer, not only in a general sense to lots of people in the audience, but to Sherry and I. So we're glad you're with us. And I know you said long-term decisions are hard, and that's totally understandable. We're glad you're a part of Echoes of Recovery and working through that now. Hopefully you'll find the support that you need as you move through the process. Thanks for being on the podcast tonight. Absolutely. Yeah. Tess, welcome back to the Untoxicated Podcast, a return panelist. Thanks for being here.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
Yeah. Talk about what brought you to what started out as a temporary situation, temporary separation, and what that's led into.
Well, my husband got sober and the behaviors actually got worse in the house. Sober from alcohol. I'll be specific on that. And about 6 months after he quit drinking, just the living environment at home was just so toxic. And the kids were hiding from him and hiding from us, and we were tiptoeing around. And it all came to this head on my youngest son's birthday. And it was almost as if he was doing things like a suicide by police kind of situation. Like his behaviors were almost intentionally trying to get me to kick him out, right? Or get me to take off. And so it all kind of came to this precipice. We had this vacation planned, and last minute he didn't get in the car and go with us. So we went on a birthday vacation without him. And I told him while we were gone, don't be there when we get back. So we started this separation, which we named a healthy separation. Like the whole idea was for us to have space away from each other to figure out what was going on and kind of reevaluate. And I would say about 6 weeks into it for myself, that's when I started realizing that I needed it more for myself. And I was healing in a way that I didn't even expect. I was diving deep into all this literature and coaching, and I was growing exponentially. And kind of like what Kate said earlier, I've been with Echoes for a while now, and that was also a huge support in all of this too, and through the community. And by May, so 6 months into the separation, I remember waking up one morning and looking around and going, I don't want him to move back in here. Like, I don't think I have the ability to allow him back into this space because it's become like a safe haven. It's become my sanctuary. The kids before, they never hung out in our common area. They were always hiding away. And the fact that he hadn't been there for 6 months, I mean, we were having game nights and my 17-year-old's hanging out on the couch. And even after the little kids are going to bed, he still wants to hang out. And that did not exist beforehand. And unfortunately, his recovery really hasn't happened during that entire time. We tried to work, or at least I tried to actively do marriage evolution, all these different things in place. And he just had no desire to do anything from that side. So there was zero coming in.
Do you attribute that? You said he's sober from alcohol. You kind of left a question dangling, so I'm gonna clarify it. So the thing he's not sober from is marijuana. Do you think
and psychedelics?
Okay.
Well, that's right. He has added that
Thank
to
you.
his regimen now.
Do you think that that's the reason he's not willing to do the work? Do you think that's the reason that things like last minute not getting in the car happen? Do you think it's substance induced, or is that just part of his personality? Kind of a challenging. It's challenging for him to commit.
I think he is an addict, just in the purest, simplest form of the word. And when he quit drinking, there was a lot of transfer addiction that went into like becoming a workaholic. And then there was some gambling, and there was some financial investment things that he started doing secretively. So there's a whole gamut of things. And I think he has found that using marijuana and psychedelics has calmed his nervous system in a way. He thinks it's therapeutic. He thinks it's medical. That's what he's convinced himself. And so he's not doing those other things anymore that are more harmful in his mind. And so if you walked up to him today on the street, he would say he's the happiest he's ever been in his life and the healthiest, and couldn't be more proud of where we're at. So, and that's how he sees it. And I wouldn't be surprised. And he won't go and get professional help. I see a therapist. They've said from the beginning that it sounds like there's a lot of other things going on. Sounds like it would be really helpful for him to get some professional help, but he refuses because his self-help is all that he needs. So unfortunately, on that recovery side of things, it's just, he's got a long way to go still.
Yeah. You said that six weeks in is when you realized that you needed it. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a subtle comment that made me think, prior to that, was it your hope that 6 weeks was a wake-up call for him?
All along, for sure. Like when the separation happened, it was like, he needs this because he needs to learn this and he needs to, And then once I was into it, it was like, I had this aha week, and it was just like, wow, like I have a lot of healing to do too. And it was necessary to go to actually take one step at a time through it and be vulnerable and charge through all the things that needed to be charged through. And I'm much better for it. And everybody in my circle, my family, my life they see it too. It's very noticeable. So I'm really grateful.
That's a huge takeaway. I think that's so common, that the initial reason for the separation, including somebody who goes away to a 60-day or 90-day or 30-day rehab, it's all about the person suffering from the addiction. And so at some point, you have to learn as the loved one that there's something in this for you too. And I love that you had that aha moment. And I hope you sharing that will help it to click with others as well. Thank you so much, Tess. Mike, we're going to come to you. And I want to clarify, because I think typically when we've had a male voice on the podcast, it's from the other side of the fence. It's from the Matt side of the fence. You are the partner of somebody with some problematic drinking issues. And so you are experiencing this from the same side as the rest of the panel. I don't want your male voice to confuse anyone. And so, come on in, Mike. Tell us a little bit about what led up to your therapeutic separation.
No, I'll assume that you mean that I shouldn't deepen my voice just to sound really male or whatever. And I have the privilege of being on the phone with some great badass women here right now, and I love their voice, and it's been a big part of my recovery too. When I think about our separation, you're right. Background, 15 years of marriage. Alcohol was never really involved. Casual drinker at most. I don't drink at all. And literally through the COVID, my spouse got COVID twice, had been going through experiencing long COVID symptoms, had some cardio, resting heart rate in the 880 range. She has a heart rate monitor put in. So over the last couple of years, it's been a combination of real symptoms of post-COVID, real symptoms of neurological brain type of things, cardio, and mental health, and the idea of women experiencing menopause. She's of that age as well, right? So like all those real medical things, and she has horrible reactions to medications. So over time, what I feel like we saw is a tendency to say, well, these meds aren't reacting. I still need something. Let's go get a drink, right? And let's have another drink, and let's self-medicate. And over the course of that year or two, for me, with anger issues and sort of inability to process anger and feelings, right? Owning up to my side of the equation, it became toxic. A lot of arguments, a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, like, how'd you lose your job? How are you going to get a job? How are we going to act? And just all this that comes with it. And yep, it's a very different perspective, right? I don't drink, but I'm an asshole, right? So that male tendency is there. She's not an asshole, like she really isn't. She's just annoying sometimes. But literally, the idea is that the separation for us, it hit the head. It was the idea that we were fighting what we thought was a medical condition so long, wasn't aware too much of how the alcohol was feeding into it. We had a blow up argument to the point where the police were involved. I was detained, and literally the separation for me was I can't go home, nor do I want to risk going home. If I'm one phone call away from another incident where if I'm just screaming and yelling and there's no physical or type of thing going on, I could have a second arrest or a second incident, and there's no chance of me ever coming through that, right? So I needed to sort of figure out the separation myself. And then the second thing that happened was a dear friend who was also an Echoes of Recovery member was my wife's college roommate in high school, and she was willing to come out and be the witness in the house and the guest in the house to say, if we're going to try to figure this out together, I needed someone in the house present. And she came, and her husband's 5 years in sobriety, and she told me much more clearly, like, I think this is more than alcohol, or I'm sorry, more than medical, and we should consider more than just medical solutions. And at that time, my spouse was already considering some sort of hospitalization, some sort of mental therapy, physical therapy to get back on her feet. She was open-minded about being away. So we were already looking into places we could check her in, but then it turned into, well, why don't we look at a detox? And reluctantly and sort of begrudgingly, she did check in. And 30 days later, she went from hospital detox to residential detox. 30 days later, from residential detox to sober living. And over that time period, about in the middle of the 30 and the 60 days is, I think, when a real light bulb went on for all of us that she's like, I need more help. I'd like more help. She loved her situation. The sober living, she says now 355 days sober and 355 days into it is the best thing she's ever done for her life.
That's great.
And there's no sort of denial. There's a real difference between the first 30 and 60 days and now. And that's the truth, right? So that 6 months of total separation was literally probably the best thing for both of us. The other thing I'll say is that when I first got introduced to Echoes, I had no clue that I had work to do in this situation. Right? So the idea of like, oh, this is her medical problem, this is her thing, I just need to keep making my money and fund this, and I need to keep a job so I can have insurance and pay for these things, and there's nothing about it that I need to change. Well, the idea of looking inward for both of us became realizing what I could do about my own anger issues and other things like that. So ultimately, the best thing in the world was that 6 months apart. And even around Christmas time, when we were talking about her moving back in, I was like, I'm not ready. And it was like, I was the one not ready to have her back. And that was even after the court case was dismissed, right? I wasn't worried about legal reasons. I was just saying I wasn't ready, um, but she moved in right after Christmas and we're back and, it's June, so that's another 6 months of that. And, feeling good, right? Hesitant, cautious, and good.
That's great. There's so many great examples in that story. I want to just second your plug for sober living. When I was drinking, when I was in early sobriety, when Sherry and I first started doing this recovery work with folks, I didn't understand sober living. I thought you go away to the rehab, you learn everything there is to learn, just take that and execute it. Like, why do you need to go someplace separate? But now I am as big a proponent as there is of sober living. Just a different environment, not going home where all your home triggers are, is so helpful to the alcoholic in recovery. To have a different environment, different people who are like-minded, go in the same direction, but you've still got independence there. I just want to, echo your plug for the benefit of sober living. That's really great. I love what everybody shared about your learning process through the separation, because that's what it's supposed to be, right? A temporary therapeutic separation. And so we better learn and start to grow as a result of it. We're going to pepper our panel with questions as soon as we tell people about our sponsors. So panel, get ready. It's not going to be going down the line one at a time. We're going to throw stuff out there and let you all jump in. But first, we would love to tell our audience that we are supported by SoberLink, the high-tech, tamper-proof, stellar quality, best-in-class breathalyzer and accountability tool. Mindset is so important, Sherry. Just like it's critical to have the right mindset in order for a therapeutic separation to work, it's equally important to have the right mindset in order for SoberLink to be a positive experience and a helpful part of the accountability equation for people.
What do you mean?
Well, the former drinker is nothing but resentful about having to blow into a breathalyzer. If that's the case, there's no room for SoberLink to be of benefit. Likewise, if the former drinker is just using SoberLink to manipulate and coerce their way back into the home or into the relationship, or if the partner is using SoberLink with the intent of catching the drinker in a relapse, they'll be far better off just spending a few bucks ordering a cheap, crappy internet gotcha device breathalyzer as opposed to investing in a product like SoberLink.
So if resentment and manipulation are not effective mindsets, which they almost never are, what is the right attitude for someone to benefit from a partnership with SoberLink?
SoberLink is a technology product. The device itself is sturdy, reliable, and tamper-proof. The scheduled testing is designed to get everyone on the same page, to know what is expected, and to verify compliance, not catch someone, cheating and doing bad. The color-coded reports distributed to accountability partners are court admissible in all 50 states and Canada and designed to help with communication and clarity, not to prove failure. People need to engage with SoberLink like it is a valuable tool to help restore trust in relationships and also to help with co-parenting situations.
That makes sense. So basically, you're saying that if people view SoberLink as an asset and not as a liability, they can get a lot from the product.
That's right. Absolutely. Get what you pay for. No matter what your situation, if you're going to partner with the top of the line product, you should get value from the partnership. To learn more about SoberLink and for a promo code for $50 off your device, please go to soberlink.com/untoxicated. We are supported by Echoes of Recovery. Our listeners might be wondering if they would benefit from a sense of belonging in Echoes of Recovery, our group for the loved ones of alcoholics. Echoes of Recovery isn't about getting someone else sober. It isn't about controlling another human being, because that doesn't work. So the drinking status of the drinker doesn't matter. The different statuses that we encounter, we have people in our Echoes of Recovery group whose drinker is still actively drinking and shows no signs of stopping. We have people in our Echoes of Recovery group whose drinker is in early sobriety and maybe there's relapses, but they're trying. We have people in the group whose partner has a year plus of sobriety and there's still lots of anger and resentment that they're processing. And we have people in Echoes of Recovery who have parted company from their alcoholic, usually through separation or divorce. But that isn't really what matters. What matters is that the people in the group are working on themselves, their own growth and their own progress.
So I see a mindset piece there too. So if you're looking for tips about how to get your drinker sober, you'll find your role in someone else's sobriety is quite limited.
That's for you, Mike.
But if you're looking for tools to help you yourself get healthy and in your recovery from the drinking of someone else, then you definitely belong in Echoes of Recovery.
That's right. We have a program to help alcoholics find lasting recovery. That's called Shout Sobriety. And we have a program to help couples work on relationship repair. That one's called Marriage Evolution. But if you're ready to become the you that you deserve, as the loved one of an alcoholic, former or current, together or separated, still drinking or not drinking, none of that matters. If you identify as that person who has experienced secondhand alcoholism, you belong in Echoes of Recovery. To find out for sure if you belong in Echoes of Recovery, please take our brief and confidential quiz at echoesofrecovery.org. All right, panel, welcome back. My first question for you all tonight, I want to talk about specifically about nervous system regulation. This is something that was mentioned briefly once or twice by people as you told your story to begin with. But let's talk about it a little more directly, a little more specifically. Nervous system activation is where you're walking on eggshells, you never know what to expect, you're hypervigilant, you can't come down from that. Did the temporary separation situations that you went through help you to find your nervous system regulate?
100%.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Test, expand.
I think my nervous system was on it was so activated that I was ignorant to the fact that that it was even something I needed to worry about or be aware of. And I battle with feeling guilt over that in particular now, especially in regards to my kids and everything too, of just thinking for how long I was in that state and how my behavior because I was in that state wasn't helping the situation. I mean, it was surviving the situation and it was getting everything done that needed to be done, but it wasn't helping. And it took being separated and being away for me to even become aware of it. And yes, 100% got it regulated.
That's so
and
interesting.
learned how to keep it regulated and learned, like, what are the triggers? What are the things to look for? How is this going to affect? And I can feel it and see it coming and know how to, try to deal with it.
Situations to avoid that are going to put you into activation. Does that apply beyond your relationship with your husband as well? Like, does it help in the outside world? Okay.
And everything. Yeah.
And you were so deeply in activation constantly, which is so unhealthy, that you weren't even aware you were in activation. You didn't know why you felt the way you felt.
Right. No, and I feel physically healthier. I've lost weight. My hair was falling out. My hair's growing back now. I mean, like, physically. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The biological manifestations from this are just amazing. Kate, you were going to come in on this. What's your experience with nervous system regulation?
Oh, I'm sitting here nodding along with everything that Tess was saying. I mean, thank God for my therapist. I was seeing a therapist even before Doug and I separated briefly. And, she recognized, because I was having chest pain, just constantly. So she worked with me a lot on how to recognize what was happening, combat it with some different, methods. And it's still, I'm still a work in process. I'm really, so I noticed that everything was calming down, during the 5 weeks that my husband and I were separated. Came home and it kind of flared up again for a little while, just because I was anxious about being home. I was anxious about what could possibly, if things were going to stick and if he was going to continue to do the work. But and then it got better. I noticed that I was just a lot calmer, a lot more focused, and not having the chest pain anymore. And then I had a recent family event that kind of has put me right back into it. So that's one thing that's been surprising about all this to me, is I thought I was kind of healing physically, but I am not as good as I thought I was, because even outside, of the alcoholism, really, really fast. So I still need to work on that.
But, I would argue that the thing, like, you're dealing with a family issue, that's the kind of stuff that we all have to deal with. And from time to time, that's going to throw you into nervous system activation. That's what your nervous system's there for. And just to recognize that it's happening again for something that we all have to deal with, that's way different than just being locked into it all the time because you're married to an alcoholic. So
100%.
interesting. Yeah, so fascinating. Jennifer or Mike, anything on nervous system?
I can say
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Jennifer, go ahead. I'll go then. If Matt said don't be polite, right? We'll just keep moving. The idea that nervous system for me was constantly feeling like in a caregiver mode, that if Rebecca was having some difficulty getting out of bed, or getting lunch, taking care of it, that I'm trying to do that during a 10-hour a day job that I'm trying to maintain, and to feel like that you're on edge that whole time. And then practically every argument we had was between midnight and 3 a.m. and sort of that's when the feelings would bubble up, and it just was happening at the wrong time. And so yes, the being on edge and being able to sort of sleep at a normal hour, and to know that she was being taken care of really well wherever she was, whichever stage of the separation she was in, really was a comfort for me, right? And that's when you start to realize how much you have, right? I'll say the same thing as Kate, right? I put on at least 80 pounds while we were dealing with what I thought was her health issues, right? I gave up on myself for that time period, and over the last year, it's been getting back on track. I'm down 50 pounds myself, right? I mean, so just that ability to focus on yourself. Some people call it detachment. We call it just taking care of yourself, right?
Oh, that's great. That's such a good example how you just, the thing that's bleeding out in the room gets all the attention, and we ignore the other things. And that, if you're the loved one of an alcoholic, means you're ignoring your own needs and your own health and safety. Oh, such a great example, Mike. Jennifer, what were you going to share?
I think the first thing I will say is that those behaviors, the nervous system upregulation, the hypervigilance, all of that stuff is so insidious that I just didn't realize it was even happening until I started to learn more about it. And I think until, I had, like I mentioned, little small glimpse of deregulation while he was traveling and stuff like that. But until I really started, to use Mike's word, to detach from him and to kind of figure out ways of allowing myself to deregulate and to take care of myself and step back and, carve out a place where I could feel safe away from him, and not, not be hypervigilant and not care so much about what he was doing. But those behaviors, I still am kind of like this still. Sometimes I'm good and then I'll catch myself falling back into them, and it's hard to focus inward, I think, and realize that you're even doing that stuff. So
I used to
I'm gonna ask a
always,
question.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
I
Tess.
used to always struggle with the fact that I felt like that self-love and working on yourself was being selfish. And I
Yeah.
was always so
Mhm.
upset with my husband for being quote unquote selfish all the time and
Yeah.
putting all his other needs first. That was a really tough struggle, especially in that first 6 weeks when we separated, where I still wasn't even willing to see that I needed to do those things for myself, because I was waiting to see what he was willing to do for the family and not be so selfish. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like there's no other way around this other than this whole self-love, deregulating and taking care of what needs to be taken care of. And that starts with yourself. And that was
Yeah.
really hard for me to see and understand
I agree,
and not
Tess. I
feel
mean,
guilty about.
our kids right now are 9 and 11. And so the last 10 years have consisted of me caring for them. And, yeah, I work out and try to take care of myself and eat healthy, but, that's not the same. So yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. You finally wake up and realize that there's a lot of other stuff you need to be doing that
Yeah.
helps with that.
I think the whole topic of selfishness needs kind of a revamp, needs a societal revamp. And what I mean by that is if the way you live your life is in service of other people, if the way you live your life is productive, if it's helpful, if it's ethical, if it's morally sound, then I think we should honor and respect ourselves when we're selfish in that way, because the things we're doing are to make the world a better place. So taking time to exercise and to eat right and to get enough sleep, that is so that you can go out in the world and be a better version of yourself, and that's to everyone's benefit. So I mean, there's the other kind of selfishness, right? Sitting on the couch, drinking and playing video games. There's not a lot of good stuff to say about that, but I just hope we can kind of revamp the way we look at the word selfish in kind of a larger context, because if you're rowing the boat in the right direction, being selfish to be a better rower is a really great thing to do. I want to touch on peace a little bit. I'm going to come to each of you, but I'm going to start with you, Jennifer, because I'm curious, with your husband traveling only a few days a week, was he gone enough that it gave your brain a chance? And when we talked about nervous system regulation, but a slightly different twist to that is, did you ever get a break from thinking about alcoholism? Did you get peace away from thinking about the elephant in the room? Was the elephant out of the room long enough for you to do that and let you think about other things?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's always still in the back of my mind. And, most recently, knowing that when he is traveling, he's running into a lot of triggers, and those have kind of been some of the times where I don't know if relapse is the right word, but tripped up, I guess I should say. And I still, even when he's not here, I still worry about what he's doing and where is he, and is he at happy hour? Why hasn't he texted or called? So no, I don't think so.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mike, how about you? You mentioned that while your wife was going through the processes of detox and rehab and sober living, you weren't sure. You weren't sure when, how, if you wanted to reconcile. So it sounds to me like your brain was still, for quite a bit of that time, occupied on this topic. Did it still kind of take all your free time?
Yeah, to go to your main question, right, about peace, I could sleep.
Yeah.
I could work an 8-hour, 9-hour day. I wasn't as worried if she was going to fall down, what was going to happen, just that constant on edge. And for me, the peace also was dictated by the environment. I was allowed visiting hours daily in the first hospital detox. So I went daily and I had dinner with her every night that day. The second detox was 1 hour a week on Saturdays, and no cell phones and nothing in between. So like, boy, you talk about separation, like, and peacefulness. I'm like, to not get a text for 8 days, until she was allowed to use the communal phone that other guests were allowed to use. Like, you talk about going from like daily craziness to, like, wow, I wonder if she's going to call tonight. Like the idea of that peace, it meant a lot to me, and it gave me a lot of time to think about it, and it also gave me time to start work with my own therapist again, right, and attack the things that I felt I needed to do. People told me constantly, put your own oxygen mask on first before you
Yeah.
help others, and that my number one thing is that I shouldn't have been trying to be Mr. Fix-It all the time. Matt, I'll say one more thing, right? When you talk about words like selfish, I go straight to the dictionary. Selfish, prioritizing your own needs at the expense of others. Whereas boundaries are setting healthy limits to protect your emotional, physical, and mental well-being. So selfish is always like a word that people use, I'd say, incorrectly. Oh, you're being selfish. No, I'm not doing that at your expense. I'm setting a boundary that is for my own protection, right? So I try to think of the real word there. And so when you said selfish, and I'm like, it's totally overused and it's totally accusatory. It's like a bad word now, right? To be selfish, but being selfish means you're putting it ahead of someone else, right? You're using it for the wrong reason.
I love that. I love the pushback. I love that what I was encouraging was a societal revamp and conversation. And here we are having a conversation specifically about that word. That's great. Thank you very much, Mike. Tess, when we talk about the word peace, the metamorphosis you've gone through during the separation requires a lot of brain power to think through all this stuff and figure it out. Have you had any peace from alcoholism and recovery at all, or is it still occupying all that brain space?
I've had peace from alcoholism. Yes. Yeah, we made a sober house April before last. And even in our close-knit like family and friend group, everybody's been super respectful of the no alcohol, situation that we've kind of put in place, or very minimal, kind of a thing. And not very pushy about it. And then Jason obviously hasn't been drinking for over a year, but I'm still dealing with the byproduct of addiction. Maybe not necessarily alcoholism, but yeah.
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 Still occupies a lot of brain space.
It's always there because we've got 3 kids and he's their dad, and he's part of the equation, and he'll always be part of the equation. And that was one of the big things that led to our separation in the first place. It was like it's like I can't let him be the example anymore. You know what I mean? Like if this is affecting my kids in a way that I just don't, I can't allow that to happen anymore. I need to put down that boundary. I don't think I knew what boundaries were before we made a sober household. I was very ignorant to that whole thing. I always just let everything, just take care of it, pick it up, clean it up. Don't nothing to see here.
Yeah. Oh, familiar with that. Kate, the boundaries that you held, again, fighting against your husband urging you to come back and you wanting to go back. Did that just occupy all your thinking during the therapeutic separation, or were you able to find any peace?
Those first couple of weeks were tough. I'm not gonna lie, but I not only made a commitment to him to hold him to my boundary, but I made a commitment to me. And I did get selfish in his eyes, probably because it was to his detriment. He wanted me home and I couldn't be home. But it was a boundary for me, to find peace. And I got stronger and stronger during those 5 weeks and came home to a lot more peace. I mean, obviously the first few weeks were very tentative. I wasn't sure how things were going to go, but even just tonight, we were making dinner together, and he has been very open through his process, in sobriety, in sharing how he's feeling and sharing what even his thoughts were while he was an alcoholic. He's really reflecting on his change, in his mind on things, and how he used to see things, and now he's seeing them with sober eyes and realizing that his impressions might have been wrong. So the peace is coming. It's an uphill battle a little bit because, you have to earn back trust, and you're a little bit, I mean, it's still early days, but, I can see a year out, 2 years out, our peace will be restored, and hopefully that happens for us.
Yeah, well, we're certainly rooting for you. Jennifer.
I was gonna say, I remember telling Kate on one of the calls that I'm like, 30 days, that's not enough. I'm like, how are you even thinking of letting them back in after 30 days? I was like, to me, it was shocking, right? Just to feel like, and that just goes to how much peace some of us really need before we can accept that decision.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and
I'm
that's
gonna
one thing. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, Kate.
I was just gonna say that's one thing I, I wanted to bring to this call was everybody has a different path, and what works for one couple isn't necessarily going to work for another. And I have had a lot of people say that to me. 30 days, that's nothing, you know. And even my therapist is like, yeah, your body isn't fully healed from being an active alcoholic for 6 months to a year. And I think I've heard Matt say the same thing. You know, it is a long process. But I came to this wanting to save my 30-year marriage, and Doug, you know, my husband at his heart is a good person and worthy of that commitment. So I'm glad that he has found the commitment to our marriage as well.
Kate, I can echo a little bit of that. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you guys talk and a little bit envious of the peace that you've had from that separation, but I also find myself getting a little bit of peace with him on the days when he is sober, and for the most part he's been sober when he's at home. um you know, we have better conversation, there's more affection, there's a little bit of those glimmers of how peaceful I think it could be. And I also want to save our marriage. I'm not ready to give up on him because he is a good person. And I know that, and I see those glimpses of that. And so I guess I will backtrack a little bit and say I do get a little bit of peace. Um, you know, when I'm past that time period of the day when I know I don't have to worry that he's going to drink today.
Yeah, you're in the intermittent stage of peace. Super interesting. Kate, you and I figured out something we have in common today when we were emailing about something totally separate from this podcast. Kate, like me, is a hopeless eternal optimist. So not only do you have to battle alcoholism and you have to prioritize your own recovery and all of that stuff, but you also, just like I do, you have to remind yourself that your glass is always half full, and that making decisions based on that, you know, kind of can be fraught. You and I, we got to get a second opinion sometimes from people, so that we don't
Right.
charge headlong into things. So, but yeah,
I don't know if I can add it, Kate and Mike, and maybe Jennifer too. I don't know your situation as well, but it sounds like your partners are on the side of recovery where they're willing to put this commitment and work into it too, which is amazing, which
It's
is so
key,
awesome.
yeah.
And as much as I wish, I mean, we've been together for 21 years, and the last thing I wanted was to, you know, file papers, which we just did day before yesterday. So it's happening. It's the last thing I wanted. But
Absolutely.
and this
Yeah.
is where we're at, because he wasn't willing to do the recovery work that he needed to do. So
Yeah, it's
And that's
5 million%, right? Like, actually what I found in the first 6 months of her being in various stages of sober living was that I had the recollection that I needed to actually do more work on myself, and that I started to feel like, well, she's putting the work in every day. I got to keep doing this work too. So yeah, just a million% that if the spouse is not ready for it or in denial, it's never going to work. You can't help, as Matt said, right? The classic case that your role in their recovery is really limited, right? And we use that as a joke now, but that's just because that was my eye-opening moment with Matt as well, to know that I couldn't be Mr. Fix-It on this one.
that's what I had to learn
yeah,
too.
I think this is such an important point. I'm so glad, Tess, that you spoke up and talked about how important your marriage was for you. And I know how hard you fought for it. I've made a lot of mistakes over the years of this podcast. I've said a lot of stupid things. You all know that. You love me in spite of that, and I can't believe it, but I'm thankful for it. But I've made a couple of really big mistakes that I regret. One of them, a couple of years ago, we recorded an episode around Memorial Day, and I said, "Happy Memorial Day! Have a happy Memorial Day 3 or 4 times." And I received several emails from military folks who corrected me. We don't celebrate Memorial Day. We don't have a happy Memorial Day. That's a moment for reflection and thankfulness and gratitude and appreciation. And felt really bad about that. But an even bigger mistake early on in the podcast, I said naively, for Sherry and I, our marriage was sacred. We took our vows seriously, and it just meant so much to us. And that's why we got through this. And I will never forget the email I got. And I know it, the person I received it from, I'm so thankful to her, because she was divorced, and she said, "How dare you? We all take our vows seriously. We all think it's sacred. We all fight to the very bitter end. And the last thing we want to do is walk away. So how dare you think you wanted it more?" And it totally changed. Honestly, it changed the whole direction of the work Sherry and I do, from let's help people recover their marriages to let's help people be healthy individuals, because that path is very different for different people. And it has nothing to do with commitment and desire and stubbornness and belief and all of that. It has to do with the situation you're in, period. And you got to make the best decisions for yourself and your family in those situations. So I'm really thankful to you, Tess, for chiming in and saying, this is the last thing you wanted to do, but it's also the right thing. And those two things can coexist. You also said something really interesting earlier, Tess, that I want to bring to Jennifer. You were talking about the shared spaces in your home and the fact that through the separation, the kids started to come out into the shared spaces. Exact same thing happened in our house. I didn't even notice that it was happening.
We were slightly annoyed sometimes with it.
Yeah.
When you're trying to clean up the kitchen in our small kitchen and they're all hanging around.
Yeah.
And I love it. But anyhow.
No, it is great. You're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I'm tired at the end of the night doing dishes, I could trip over a few fewer people. That would be okay, but it's okay. It's great. It really is. Jennifer, have you had that experience when your husband is gone for his trips? Is the vibe different in the house? Are the kids out more?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, it's a little bit hard to know, because we're sort of just getting into that stage where sometimes I'll look around and realize I'm the only person in the room, and where are the kids? They're all off doing their own thing. And that's not because they're trying to get away from us. It's just because they're gaining some independence. But I do feel like maybe they're in the communal space a little bit more frequently when it's just me, or I think too when he's sober and around. Just the vibe is definitely lighter and different. um they still want to be around us quite a bit, I think. So that's hard to judge, but it is different, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Kate, I'm curious. I know that you looked into the shortest term lease you could find. You were with us. You were part of our group. You were trying to make a really hard decision. Was part of the reason that the decision was hard did it have I mean, when you hear separation and you hear divorce, those sound so permanent. Did you have the nervousness that if you went through with this and you separated for some period of time, it would inevitably turn into something permanent? Like you'd get the ball rolling and you couldn't stop it. Was that a fear for you at all?
Absolutely. I think that's why I backed out of the 15-month lease. That just seemed like eternity. And I my husband's actually said that he is so grateful that I didn't do that, because he thinks he would have spiraled down. Now, who knows? Who knows? We might have had the same path and just maybe I would have broke the lease. I mean, and what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to lose some money. Okay. Yeah, there was a lot of fear. There was financial fear. There was, what are people going to think fear? There was just all the things that go through your mind when you're contemplating this major change in your life. And so that's what I everybody's situation is different. Everybody has to do what works for them. And like I said, I took a lot of flack for doing such a short, separation. It worked for us. It might not work for other people. And it could have gone vastly different. I mean, if my husband hadn't chosen to get sober and hadn't held to my boundary of 30 days, I would have had some tough decisions to make, because I was no longer willing to work or to live the way we were heading. I didn't want the rest of my life to look like that, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Mike, for you to go down the path of separating the way you did, you guys had to hit a rock bottom kind of moment. I mean, you talked about your fear of being back in the home alone and getting angry again, and you couldn't have the call to the police happen again. So, given the fact that you needed this stimulus to push you guys over the edge into the therapeutic separation period, is there any part of you that wishes you had seen red flags earlier and had initiated a separation in a different way? Like, do you just wish you had gotten there earlier?
Earlier, sure. But what the main message I think I'd love to give any of your listeners is just the idea that I also was uneducated in alcoholism and addiction.
Mhm.
I grew up, and my dad is a great dad. He's father of the year, but couldn't tell whether he's having a good day or a bad day. He'd never once let his emotions on the table. I had no clue of what sort of help was available to me. Had I been in a group like Echoes of Recovery for a year leading up to this, or had I known to even look for any of those red flags, right? And for so long, it was a medical pursuit of what was wrong. And so, yeah, I wish it would happen sooner. And I guess what we talk about a lot on at Echoes too is the idea that the effect it has on spouses is progressive as well. It's not
Yes.
like one day you realize that things are shit. You don't wake up the next morning and go like, man, we were in a toxic argument last night. And then you look at yourself and you say, I've had toxic arguments for the last 12 months. Like, these are just constant arguments and battles. And you realize, like, do I really want to be that person? And in this case, the separation was so needed, right? It was either her or me. And it just so happened that she was begrudgingly willing to check herself into detox. And I'm so glad that 355 days later, she said it's the best decision she's ever made. If Kate, same as what you said, if she in the first 30 days, there were moments where she's like, I don't want to be here. I'm not these kind of people. I'm not one of these meth heads or whatever. I'm not addicted. I can have a glass of alcohol with lunch or dinner, and I'm coming home. And I did have to struggle with the idea of like, well, if you come home, what does that mean? And for me, it meant I wasn't going to be there. That I was going to have to set a boundary. And Matt and you and I emailed about that even before I was a real active member with you. And the idea of just saying that I had to have a boundary, and thank God she didn't test it, right? I was expecting like, hey, can you come get me and bring me home, and I'm checking myself out and I can't deal with it anymore. And my decision was going to have to be to say no. And I don't know if I had the balls to actually say no. Like, there are badass women in Echoes of Recovery who would have made a better, faster decision than me. And so I don't know if I could have stuck with my boundary, right? So the idea of just learning about this stuff way sooner would have helped. But
Yeah.
I didn't even know you existed, right? So to even have the awareness that now there's everything in the world has a podcast that you can research, everything in the world that if you want to dive in deeper, but never think that you're beyond help, right? Is the message I think I'd love to convey.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. You got a serious workout on what boundaries are, how to put them into place, and how to hold them quickly. And I really respect the fact that you acknowledge that you're glad that one didn't get tested any earlier than it did. Because boundaries, I mean, that's something we have to learn. You can say it, but actually standing behind them is a whole different ballgame. Super interesting, Mike. Tess, one of the things that makes everyone's situation different and everyone's decision about what they're going to do as it relates to stay or go unique and individualized is our tolerance that we have for the conditions we're living in. You, my dear sweet friend, tolerated a lot. We know a lot of details of your story. And so I want to commend you on the stick-to-itiveness you had and all the things that you tried to fix a situation that was beyond traumatic. That said, do you now that you've made the progress you have, do you wish you had initiated the separation earlier? Do you feel any guilt or remorse for that? Oh, you're muted, Tess. I hope you can remember the first thing you said, because I'm sure it was brilliant.
I said I can echo kind of what Mike said in regards to, I don't think you're aware or ready for it until it actually happens. I don't think I would have had the know-how or the ability to see it in the light or the lens from which I was seeing it until I was actually at that point to see it that way. Now, do I wish I had come across and gained that knowledge earlier on? Of, yeah, that would have been awesome, but that wasn't where I was at, and I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wasn't able to do it up until I had that knowledge. Otherwise I probably would have used those different tools. And it was actually a neighbor of mine who shared with me about Echoes and you guys. And I'm so grateful that she did that, because it was day zero, I guess, of figuring out that there's this whole other world of understanding this, and I'm not crazy, and I'm not, this bitch that is, destroying my husband's reality and all of those things. So, but I wasn't ready to do that until I learned all of that.
Well, even if you are ready to, it's finding the right place, the right format. I mean, I went to countless Al-Anon meetings and they just weren't for me. I never felt any connection, or I wasn't comfortable there. And I just stumbled upon this accidentally. So I think you're not ready until you're in the right spot.
These answers this is another way in which both sides of the street, both sides of the alcoholism equation are so similar. I could easily spend the rest of my life wallowing in shame and guilt and despair about my active addiction. But one of the tools that I use to move past that is acknowledging that I didn't know until I knew either. And I know I'm the bad guy in this. I get that. But societally, all things were pointing in the direction of, we use alcohol as a reward. We use it to mourn. We use it to celebrate. We use it to relax. We use it in all these ways. And it's okay. And I wish I had woken up sooner, but I didn't. And one of the ways that I am able to move on and, feel good about myself is to release that guilt, because I didn't know until I knew either. So I think it'd be great if there was a playbook. It would be great if there was a semester your senior year in high school where they taught you about the dangers of addiction or something. And I think we're moving in that direction, especially because of the just prevalence of technology addiction that our society is going to have a huge reckoning with here sometime pretty soon. But the topic is more prevalent now with young people. I just wish there was more general understanding so that we could recognize the red flags when we see them. But I think you're right. You can't run around regretting the fact that you didn't start the separation sooner because you didn't know till you knew. What are a couple? Let's finish with this question. We'll just go around the group. Are there things that you wish you had done differently with regard to, if not timing, how you did the separation, the location? Some people do in-house separations where they say you're in the basement and I'm on the main floor and never the two shall cross. I don't know. Do any of you spend any time thinking, here's what advice can you give to listeners about how to enact a therapeutic separation? Who wants to jump in on that one?
I will, just because you brought up something I did try. My husband and I actually did sleep on separate floors for a while. And it helped a little bit for me to find some peace. The basement, even though I called it my dungeon, kind of became my sanctuary. But it wasn't enough. In the end, I needed the physical distance to have that time away and the time to think things through. So
we do that here sometimes that was probably one of the first boundaries I set was, you can't sleep in my bed anymore if you're drinking. And For the most part, he has adhered to that, but I can't remember what the question was. Oh, sorry.
Well, just is there something you do differently? Is there, I mean, I know in your
Oh, yeah.
situation, your piece comes when he's on business trips. Would you call his boss and tell him he needs to travel a little bit more? Like, I doubt you do that.
I wouldn't do that. But I would maybe draw some harder, faster boundaries sooner than I have, and been better at sticking to those boundaries. I erased that line more times than I care to admit. So I would have changed that.
Yeah. Tess, what advice do you have for folks out there that are considering a therapeutic separation?
Yeah, when we first separated, in my mind, a separation was a separation. It was a physical separation, but we had kids. And so I was ready to create a separation plan, and we're going to adhere to these rules, and he wouldn't even read them. And in his mind, he wasn't going to live here, but he was still going to have dinner every night with the family. And because I had never held boundaries with him, I don't think he knew that I could, or that I was going to, or I knew how to. And so that was a very difficult process, that I know I still was too easy on him early on. My best friend always says, "You're just too nice. You're just too nice. Don't be so nice all the time." And I'm just not trying not to rock the boat. But again, it was a process that it took me time to, it's like learning how to build that muscle, right? Like it just took repetition over and over and over again to build that ability to be able to make a boundary and set it and hold it for myself and understand what that was for myself, rather than putting it on him, because ultimately that's what it is. It was, I needed to do that, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you said he wouldn't read your boundary plan. Now, Tess, you are significantly younger than Sherry and I, so I assume your husband is too, although I've never met him. Maybe that's a bad assumption. But so I'm assuming he's not a Gen Xer, and I have it on good authority that Gen Zs and millennials, they do read. So I was going to say maybe you should have recorded a podcast episode with your boundary plans and make him listen to them. But I don't think that would have worked either. I just think he wasn't interested. I think that's got to be what it was. Didn't care about your boundary plan.
Nope, didn't care about it at all. And he calls himself a Gen Xer, but he's 81, so I think that's the gray area.
Oh yeah,
Gen X, I think. Yeah, I think I don't. He wants to be.
Oh, he was
I
born
thought you were
in
saying he's 81 years old.
He's not.
I'm like,
no, born in
1981. Yeah, born in 1981. But
I don't know. Maybe that's borderline. I don't know. I talk about generations like I have a clue. I don't. I know what I am. I drank out of a hose. That's how you decide, right?
Yeah.
I have a hard time relating to millennials. I don't think I'm truly all millennial either. I can't agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I just say you need to stop talking about him, because you think a new generation is born every 10 years, and that's not how it was set up.
It sure would be easier.
But that's, yeah.
I mean, we should have a societal question about generation naming. And what's up with sometimes they get a cool name and sometimes it's just a letter, just some random letter. Like, you're not very cool, you get the next letter.
All right. Well, as soon as you get off here, you can put on your Walkman. I feel like we're on a walk. So
I'm just trying to fluster Mike. Mike, do you have any advice for our listeners about installing a therapeutic separation plan in your relationship?
Well, if you're trying to fluster me, then you can talk about the Gen X stuff more, and I can say that all of your attempts to try to get the younger generation to read, including your wonderful blog about the letter you've written to your children, so that you hope they will read that someday and see it more sympathetically, right?
Way to plug and promote. You are a marketing guy.
I could jump that right in there, but that just shows a lot of guts that he's just hoping to change that generation, and that someone will magically read this letter and really open up a good dialogue, right? So some of us need it. And I'm also, the thing I would have done differently is I would have asked you guys to put your podcasts on TikTok sooner, because I would have found you sooner. I would have found you scrolling desperately through something, and I might have found you sooner on the TikTok. But for the truth, right? The only thing I really wish I could have done differently, and this came up in resentment processing when both of us were like we're well into sobriety now, or it was still while she was in sober living and we were doing some joint work, and she really expressed that it didn't feel like a boundary. It felt like an ultimatum that she needed to check herself in to detox, or there was no other option, and that I was really adamant about that boundary, and that I needed to apologize for it too, right? That she wanted some apology to it, and in my classic defensiveness was sort of in like didn't you just say this was a really good thing for you and everything's working out, like everything's working out for the better. But when I really looked at it empathetically, yeah, it was a really ultimatum kind of boundary, and the other option of like, well, then maybe I just won't be there. Maybe I need to leave. Maybe I need to find a different house. If you don't want to check in, you're welcome. It could have been more of an empathetic conversation. But even then, I'll go back to it. I wasn't educated enough to be empathetic. I was mad. I was a week out of jail and ready to just be like, I can't be in the house. There's no other way this will work. It was just such a toxic moment. I'm not sure I could have done it differently. But do I wish I could have been more empathetic about trying to seek the help she needed and be more empathetic about it? Yep. But even then, it's like, I don't even know how that would have been possible. Right? I don't know. So I'm glad it's worked out there. Also, one last marketing plug for the podcast. We need the Best of Sherry series. I want those clips, the best of Sherry, because as you know, as a spouse of the one in recovery, Sherry's point of view has been so meaningful to me. So I just want to point that out and say thank you, Sherry, for all your help. Thank you, Matt, for everything that you do.
No,
Thank you. Maybe we
Absolutely.
will put that. Thank you. Maybe we will put that on the TikTok. I don't know if anybody caught that. I'm just going to point that the TikTok. In fact, we were told by our children, why are you guys even using TikTok now? Nobody your age does this. And I'm like, wait, there's like a lot of like older people. You just got to search the right criteria, for the feeds you need on the TikTok.
Yeah,
in our
creepy white guys with bald heads are on TikTok. So, if that's your audience, then boom, rock and roll. You've hit me. You got me.
You left me speechless, which it's not the first time, Mike. That's good stuff. The Best of Sherry, I've got an idea for that. Oh, I'm going to hit you guys up for some help. We'll be bringing that to you very shortly. That's going to be good. Yeah, I think the last point that you made, though, in all seriousness, it's important to acknowledge that two things that seem contradictory can be right at the same time. And that's what that resentment processing is all about. It's about acknowledging that, yeah, you can look back on this and say it was the best thing that ever happened to you. And it was so important that you had this period of recovery the way that you did. But also it sucked at the moment when it was happening, and it was scary, and it was hard, and it was difficult. And we can acknowledge that without saying we would do it differently the next time. And so it's just such a complicated resentment processing, dealing with trauma. It's such a complicated process, but doing it with an open mind and an open heart, that's the key. And I can think of no group of people who I'd rather have a conversation with that is about having an open mind and an open heart. You guys are loving and thoughtful and smart and caring, and you're making all the best moves you can as the information becomes available and as you learn your way through this process. Thank you guys so much for being on and having this discussion. We really appreciate you being on the Intoxicated podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt and Sherry.
The pleasure's ours.
Thanks, guys.
If this roundtable discussion was helpful to you, please remember that the Intoxicated podcast is brought to you by the 501c3 nonprofit organization Stigma. Stigma does not take government money. This work is only possible through the fully tax-deductible donations of listeners like you. Please consider setting up a recurring monthly donation of just $10 to keep this podcast thriving. Please go to supportintoxicated.org to show your support. Thanks for listening to the Intoxicated podcast. You've got this, and we've got you.